Okay.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Carver Select Board to order on September 21st at 7:01.
Okay, and I'll call the meeting of the Carver School Committee to order, September 21st at 7:01 as well. So, Sarah, would you like to still take that item out of order so Mark doesn't have to hang around if he doesn't want to?
Yes.
Yes, so
Okay.
I'd like to take, if everyone's okay with it, I'd like to take the item number 7, the update on stop arm cameras on school buses, including funding mechanism, out of order so that the chief does not have to hang out with us all night.
He's welcome to, but that's fine by me. Any objection? Okay. So Brad or Scott, would you like to start on this?
I can give you some quick background on this, just for the funding mechanism and where we stand right now. So we were able to get a grant back in March for $18,000. It's a state grant. It paid for one-time cost, and with the one-time cost, we were able to buy, with including install, 12 initial stop arm cameras. And what happens is, as soon as the bus driver puts the bus in park or stop, she flips on the light switch to put the indicator for the stop arm camera to go. We get a live feed directly once that's pressed, and that's what we'll take a snippet of, and we'll be able to shoot that off when an infraction occurs to the police department. But long term, plan.
Brad, can I interject for 1 second, buddy? I apologize. Can I interject? Who's ever hosting this meeting, can you please mute the meeting?
Yeah, is it
Go to another town.
Area 58 is?
Thank you.
There's a lot of background noise with whatever you're saying, and it keeps coming in.
It was
So
the
everybody
report.
needs to mute. Who's
I think
not
it was the
speaking.
reporter, James.
Right.
Okay. So if you're not speaking or you're not part of this is what we've been doing in our committee, Sarah, on these meetings. You're asking people that are not part of the committee or are not speaking to leave their microphones off for the meeting and their video off.
I concur.
Okay, so if everyone could do that, we'd appreciate that I'm part of the 2 committees.
Okay.
Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Okay, so just I'll start from scratch again. So we were able to receive $18,000 from a state grant that paid for the initial 12 cameras that included install on the 12 buses. In addition to that, they came with a 7-year warranty on them, and we also got 1 spare. The goal was to get obviously our entire full 71 passenger fleet equipped with them, but with the mindset of the grant was only for $18,000, we can only purchase 12 cameras. And as we go forward and move through our capital list, any buses we get, we'll spec them to come with the camera with a 7-year warranty on them. So thankfully, anyone we bid with for buses or get quotes from, they do have the ability to quote those involved in the pricing and to have the buses come with them. Same system, it's all uniform. It's pretty simple. Infraction occurs, and we're able just to we take a little microchip from the bus, plug it into Maureen's computer. Maureen's able just to trim down the actual trip, and we'll be able to take that snippet and send it right to the police department for them to decide on how to handle the infraction. So long term, this definitely is something if we want to stay with. The funding mechanism for that is just to build it into the capital cost of the actual bus.
Thank you, Brad. Could we hear from Chief Dufley on this?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
So I've spoken with Brad Brothers and Mr. Neef and Mr. Carver on this program. We support it. We get a certain number of complaints every year about this happening. It'll give us video evidence that we can then follow up on and take whatever legal action is appropriate. We have already discussed it with the magistrate at court, and they will accept it. We're still going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis as to how we respond as far as the enforcement action. Enforcement action on a violation like this could be anything from a verbal warning to a written warning to an actual money citation. But that's a decision we have to make at the time based on the evidence we see on the camera. I haven't seen what the cameras produce yet for evidence, but once we have that, we can take the appropriate law enforcement action using the data they give us.
Thank you, Chief. Just for a little background for people who don't know, this came up at a meeting, actually came up before one of our meetings. I saw some complaints on social media about this, and this is one of those occasions that social media is actually a good thing. people were complaining about occurrences of this happening in Carver more and more often, about people just blatantly going around buses when the red lights are on. So I actually made a post about it on the 2 Carver pages, and I asked for input, and I was getting messages, I was getting responses to that, and getting emails as well. And I brought it to my fellow committee members. They had told me their own stories, and they were completely supportive of this move to investigate these type of cameras, as well as the administration. So I'd like to thank Scott and Brad and Chief Dufely and all my committee members for being in this with me 100%. And I really appreciate it. And I hope it makes a difference in the community, that the warning goes out that if you come into the town of Carver, you go around the bus, you're going to be on camera, so. And Brad, you said the company name is Safety Vision?
Yes, Safety Vision. Yep.
Okay. And one of the things that we didn't want to do is that when investigating these, some of these companies actually they automate the tickets themselves, and they send the ticket themselves. And I don't know how they do it, but they're able to do it themselves, and there ended up being a lot of basically false charges that were challenged all the time. So the first thing we said is that we don't want to call the would have helping us with this if we got you the video. And he said, sure, right away, So he was very, very supportive of it. So every video that goes, like Brad said, will be going right to the police department. So it won't be from some third-party company looking to generate money or anything like that. And the other thing is, a few other ones, when they issued the ticket, they actually got a portion of the fine sent to them, which I thought was outrageous. So this one doesn't do that. This was just the equipment, So we, Brad did a lot of research on that as well. So does anybody else have any questions or anything for the chief or Brad on this?
We hope it's a program we don't use often. That's number one.
No, it's terrific. Thanks for getting the grant.
Yeah, that helped. Okay.
Good job, guys.
Chief, thanks for being here. Hey, Chief Dufely, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. It's nice to hang out with you. I'm going to get back to working on a grant that I'm working on for our stuff. So if you need me, I'm here. Just somebody text me, I'll come back on.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.
Oh, so you want to start from the top?
So now maybe we could get back to the budget update and discussion. I don't know who would like to go first. Mr. LaFawn, Mr. Neef, Mr. Brothers?
All right, I think we're going to Rick on this.
Okay.
Well, that's so kind of you, Scott. Well, I know in the last, we'll say, month or so in particular, we've been meeting fairly often, Scott, Brad, me, and Meg, to try and deal with some factors that have come up since the annual town meeting. We all knew and really weren't sure what the outcome was going to be of the state budget process. As it happens, I think we're all aware that, at least for the time being, the state is holding cities and towns harmless for local aid. We did have some particular factors, though, this year that we did not expect, even after subsequent to that. The primary issue being about almost $500,000 in revenue from anticipated new growth, pilot agreement funds for new solar projects. Those are not coming online during this fiscal year as we had hoped and had been projected. So on top of already operating costs that outstrip the capacity of state aid, from an inflation standpoint, we had to add yet another close to $500,000 to the budget we were trying to overcome, the budget gap. Without getting into too much detail, I know that Scott, Brad, and Meg and I had sat down several times, and basically we compromised and decided to back off some capital items this year in order not put funds into the capital stabilization fund that were not necessary or not urgent this year. After having done so, had our conversation led us to have a conversation directly, Meg and I, with the chairman of the finance committee. And ultimately, and I know that this was something Scott and Brad are also supportive of, is using approximately little over $200,000 to help from stabilization to plug the gap for this year to help us get us into FY 2022. There was just too many of these surprises to overcome, too many one-time costs. But I think that, considering the state of the state, and again, Mr. Jermaine was very happy to assist, and it will be his recommendation also to approve the recommendation of, I guess I call it our finance officers group of the four of us. So I think we feel good about it. It is going to create an issue FY22. And as you probably already know, we're already behind schedule from past years in terms of the budget process. But if it helps, we're not unique. That's what's the state of the state at the moment. So we're likely going to be at least 3 weeks behind in terms of our budget process too. So we might have to do what we can to expedite that. But as of for FY 2021, we do have a reasonable compromise. Again, the major factor is using a little bit of stabilization this year to get us into FY 22. And it would certainly be our goal to replace those stabilization funds during next fiscal year also. So Scott, Brad, I don't know if you have anything you add.
To appreciate the cooperative effort, the collaboration that the school departments had with the town administrator on this over the past several months. So Rick and Meg have been great to work with, and Brad and I appreciate the time and effort they've put into looking at this situation and coming up with solutions that we're all supportive of and comfortable of. We're comfortable.
Thanks. And just for your knowledge, Meg's not on this call, so I think she was afraid we'd give her more work to do.
Yes.
So no, I think that's a good point, Scott. Obviously, the knowledge and expertise of Brad and Meg are just really indispensable right now too. So well said. Anything else?
No.
Question?
Excuse me, 1 minute.
I thought you said can I have a bite?
Rich Goulart at Area 58. Rich Goulart.
Can you buy me one?
Anyone there at Area 58?
Can I ask my question since we're waiting?
Well,
Please.
I'm trying to get this muted. I'm sorry. I can't control the mute for these people. So go ahead, Bob. I beg your pardon.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, how are we handling the bus drivers for the school? And are they being paid? Are they not being paid? How is that going on with the whole COVID-19 protocol?
Yeah, so I can answer that question. Currently, we are paying the drivers up to 3.5 hours, if not more, depending on training days. What we decided to get all the trainings that we usually do throughout the year done earlier this year. The original 10 days, and that's now extended on for the following, obviously this week and
did all of that for you.
part of last week.
And you're gonna come at me with wanting more.
Okay. Megan, can you set your mute down?
Megan, Megan Chiavaro, would you please mute your microphone?
I'm not buying you an LOL on tape right now.
Megan, please mute your microphone.
That's annoying.
Hey,
my own thing.
I know Rich, obviously not out there, but Rich, if you make one of us a co-host, you can make me the co-host if you want.
I should have done that. Rich was eager to let me do that, and oh, here it is.
There we go. She went to mute. So Bob, to answer your question, just I'll backtrack on that. The first original 10 days that we were scheduled to miss, we scheduled all of our in-person PD days for drivers that usually happen throughout the year. We said let's utilize that time in advance. Since then, we've actually, this past from Wednesday on and then this week too, we're going to have them come in and do a couple more trainings or just have them circle the buses around to burn off the gas that's been in there all summer. In addition to that, when we're hopeful routes come out Wednesday night or Thursday, drivers on Thursday and Friday are going to do dry runs so they have their new routes down. That's one of the big differences in this year compared to any other year previously is routes are totally different from what they usually are. So the more practice they get on that, the better off they're going to be rolling in day one. Obviously, there's always issues. We miss stops. It's the reality of day-to-day practice from year to year, opening a couple weeks. But these are all new, so it's just that much more important that they get out on Thursday and Friday and able to do dry runs to recognize the route. Again, it's because they're different for everyone. No route is going to be the same as it has been in the past.
And my next question would be, you kind of brought it up a little bit, but the fuel allowance, are you going to have a reduction in fuel this year?
Yeah, we should see, especially missing almost a full month to start with. Absolutely, we should see a reduction in fuel.
All right. And was that included in how you guys budgeted everything with that reduction?
No, so this is kind of two different things going on. The budget Rick talked about is just the overall town-wide budget. For the individual school department, to be honest with you, we still need to talk about long-term funding for a couple positions that came up, like the COVID positions. They're only covered through December 30th. We have to then find a funding source from December 30th on to the remainder of the fiscal year if we keep them. I'm assuming we're going to have to. So that budget discussion has not happened yet on our side, but I can tell you there's going to be more expenses than there are savings, but that definitely is a piece of savings I'll be able to utilize and move to another piece of the budget.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
No problem.
Thank
And
you.
just to add on
Does anyone else have a question? Mrs. Bogart?
Yeah, the money that's being taken from the stabilization fund that'll have to be replenished, why isn't it just coming out of free cash if it's a one-time thing?
Yeah. That's not going to happen probably at least until, I'm going to assume, November right now. So when we get to the October 15th town meeting, we will not have a certification yet of free cash. That's why. However, that doesn't mean that at a subsequent date, free cash can't be used to, I guess, reimburse the stabilization account. That could be an option too.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
And just for the school committee knowledge as well, the capital items that we're looking at from the school perspective are not purchasing 2 71 passenger buses this year. As you guys know, I don't love that aspect of it, but I also know it's a reality of getting us through, and it's in good conscience that we are able to do that. And when you think about it too, the buses almost have had 4 to 5 months off from regular running time, that we're able to stretch out the few that we have that we want to get in the replacement plan. We're okay to bring them on for 1 more year. So that's not a big deal.
So Brad, are you now talking about agenda item number 3?
I don't know. What was agenda item 3? Sorry, I haven't looked at the agenda in depth today.
Sorry, not 3, I meant 4. A review of future capital outlay expenditures.
Sure, we can hop on. We can touch on that after if you want.
But let's see if we're finished with this one first. Sure. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions about or points to make about the budget update? Okay. So let's move along to a discussion about the Consolidated Operations and Maintenance Department. Mr. LaFawn.
Yes, and Sarah, I only raised this because during this particular time, I know it's been unprecedented, but I know there's been particular strain on the staff, more so than any other time. There's been, been illnesses. There's been. It's just been a very trying year, and I know that the organization hasn't existed all that long, and Scott and I have talked about it probably for about 15 seconds, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But my only question is to what extent that people believe, and people meaning the school administration, school committee, believe that this, as it's constantly constituted, is it working at the way it was intended? Are there gaps that need to be filled? I know with the school opening, this has again been an extraordinary time. It has required some staffing that maybe again might be unprecedented. However, from an organizational standpoint, is this working the way that it had been intended? I don't have the answer. I only raise it because I'm still the new kid on the block. And I know that has been an unprecedented time. And I also know that anytime you have a new organization, you have growing pains, and it's good to evaluate and reevaluate. We're doing it right now with our inspections department. permitting department. I know it's been done with other areas, other departments. So I only raise it as a question as to whether or not people believe this is a time to do that, if there's a reason to do it. If people do not think that's the case, then I'm not looking for more work to do, but I do think it's a valid question, at least, to put before, the body.
Rick, I'd like to, yeah, if I could address that for a minute, I'd appreciate, that'd be great. So a few years back, we actually consolidated in two places, maintenance and operation and technology. I think the consolidation of technology with the school and the town has really been outstanding. I think it's been a real strength. I think it's been a positive and a win-win from both the school perspective and from my perception of the town perspective as well. I think that's been a huge positive. Operations and maintenance. Sorry, Rick.
No, I would say I would agree with that. Again, just both in terms of the service to me, I know to our financial departments, and it's one of those strange areas where no one's complaining. So that's a good thing. So I would agree with your sentiment with regard to that. Yes.
And in terms of we did technology and operations and maintenance it's almost the same time. I think it happened within the same year. And operation and maintenance, not that it hasn't been a super positive, I just feel from the school's perspective that we're actually still a little understaffed. And actually this year's COVID has just made that, it's exacerbated that problem. So from our perspective, we feel as if we would do well if had a, the thing we've talked about a little bit and haven't had in-depth conversations with the school committee on this. Brad and I have talked about it a little bit. We have a John Woods equivalent on the school side. The myriad of projects that Dave has to manage across both the town and the school is really, it's a heavy load. And some of that load is going to diminish a little bit because some of our building projects are finishing up. And Dave's been integral in the building of the new elementary school, the accelerated repair at the middle high school, the new track and field at the middle high school, obviously the police station, going all the way back to the building of the fire station. And Dave's been actively involved in all of these projects. And that project management is a huge piece. So from our perspective, we feel like maybe there's been a little bit of loss in Dave's leadership. And I don't say that in any negative detriment to Dave. He's pulled in a million different directions. And the school's feeling as if we would benefit from having, John Woods is like a deputy for the DPW, that we might do well in the operations and maintenance townwide, having a deputy on the school side with Dave maintaining as the oversight. So that's something we've discussed a little bit, and I think there would be a benefit for that. So I think there's some real positives of bringing the operations together. I do think there's places where redundancy has been taken away in terms of that process, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. I don't know if any of the committee members have any thoughts, or Brad, or.
Go ahead, Brad. Brad, were you going to say something?
Yeah, well, I was going back and forth. I will, though. Yeah, I agree with everything Scott said. It's not a shot at Dave. It's just a matter of how many projects there are going on in town to handle. And I feel like a lot of the day-to-day communications that our custodial staff really need to know what's going on, that's been lost. When we originally rolled this out, it's always best intention to say, yeah, that communication we picked up by myself or by the building principals. But when everything it just gets too much going on a day-to-day basis, that you can have someone to give the communication that needs to be done on a day-to-day basis, that having someone, a director like John, or someone in a more of a management role, that obviously they have to be hands-on. We can't hire another manager that's not hands-on. They need to be hands-on, but having someone who is kind of the custodian's direct report, other than Dave, is, I think, a very good idea that we should really discuss. But again, it comes down to funding. What's our funding mechanism long-term on that? You guys know how many years we've gone forward the budget now, and we're scratching just to get by with what we have for current staff and trying to maintain staff. It's not, obviously we want to keep money in classrooms and not in facilities, but at the same time, we can't let facilities fall. We got a brand new building. We want to maintain that. COVID going on. Thankfully, we have COVID funds to add on a couple positions to make sure that cleaning takes place. But I think having that kind of oversight would be a benefit to the school long term.
Oh, yeah, and thanks, Brad. And as I said, I didn't bring this up in any way to suggest that Dave isn't worth his weight in gold. As you know, him and John Woods are about as dedicated and competent as you're going to get. But everybody's stretched thin right now, and I think that was some excellent points you made there, Scott, in terms of maybe maybe it's with all the projects going on, it may not be the best time to judge where we stand right now, but I think your thoughts are well taken in terms of perhaps having more hands-on leadership at the school. But then again, I only raise this in terms of is this something that people believe we should be continuing to talk about? And I don't mean before town meeting. I mean as maybe in the year to come. That's all. And the kind of the times we're in made it brought it to my mind as something that we may want to at least put on the table going forward. It's not in any way meant to denigrate anybody's efforts, and I think all of you know that. So,
Right.
And I guess the other piece I would add in is I think that I'm a supporter of these consolidations. I think overall it's good for the community. It's good for the town that we've consolidated where we can between school and town departments. So I'm not making any kind of position that we need to break that down in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something the school committee can definitely speak on our side, in much more detail in future meetings. I've been thinking since we've been having to deal with the COVID issue that just even redundancy in our organization, and this is something I've spoken to Scott about, even in our administration. So we had to delay things with our higher open. Redundancy in our organization would be a good thing, so we maybe not have to have a delay if we have other issues. But these are conversations we'll definitely have in the future on our side, I know for sure. But I think, Rick, you bringing this up tonight was a good first step.
Yes, I agree. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone's comments. I'd like to continue the discussion on this too at some future date, not before town meeting.
No, this is not imminent, but again, just something that, and again, some of it is my own learning curve here. And so I'm kind of looking at things from a perspective of the new kid on the block.
No, I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any comments on this topic? Mr. Belvin.
Consolidation is about, bottom line is saving money is number one. And number two is making sure that if we're saving the money, that all the jobs are being done when they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be done. And from the way the school ran it before, for your maintenance department and janitorial staff there, having another person, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of consolidation if we have another person being a mid-management?
Good point.
I think that's a fair point, Bob. I agree. And I think that, I guess, from our perspective, that when we merged those two departments, Dave was 100% a school employee at that time prior, so his position was a full school position. And I don't know, I don't know if we want to do, I don't know if I can do a fair analysis and say how it's now been split. So I don't know if it's 50-50 or 60-40 town school, or Dave would probably speak to that better. And I guess we're saying from the school side that the loss, the school did take a little bit of a loss when that came over, and we're feeling that with the school. So it is kind of a reevaluation of that a little bit in terms of overall. And I realize what you're saying, that it does. My phone is like, I can mute people, so as I was talking, I was not muted. There we go. Sorry about that. Bob, I think you raised a fair point, and maybe it's something that fiscally we will not be able to do. But we just want to at least put it out there that maybe we can try to find that balance. And even this year, Brad mentioned a couple of COVID positions. He referred to them as COVID positions. We've actually hired 2 additional custodians this year, and that is, we can charge that off to the Plymouth County CARES Act funds through the end of December. Brad referenced that, and we've done that just because the reality of the new cleaning protocols that are in place on the school side that are going to have to be implemented. So we have 1 additional custodian at each building, and So just, I guess the needs have become more intense. There's just more needs. So I think we're gonna have to balance, as always, we're gonna have to balance the needs with being fiscally responsible.
Thank you very much.
I got a question
James?
on that. So
James,
there-
yes, please.
I think in a way, Scott, you answered it, but I think looking at our next conversation with this, and somewhat not in a sense of defense, but I think in a defense of Dave, maybe some more clarity, which I think, Scott, you just stated you can't have right now. Clearly, with this consolidation, Dave has picked up a lot more work. So how has that been compensated in the school side? So if we're looking more in the school side, is that in reality because Dave is being pulled away more and that just means less at the school, as opposed to, is there a bridge where there's more collaboration? And you may not, as you said, have the answer to that ratio or how that's working right now, but I think some clarity on that might be helpful too, because if we're looking for that other position, that could be because Dave is pulled over to help the town and it's left us with a hole.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question, comment?
Jim?
Yep. One thing we have to make sure we look at too, I know we're going to look at the school side, but also on the town side, I know like the town fields and especially the ball fields and things like that, where I know everybody's kind of pulled in different directions. So we have to, I think Scott, you had mentioned before, we should look at both sides, town and school, as far as where we need some help.
Yeah, I mean, even Jim, in reference to that, that even with the new elementary school, that brought in a whole new field complex. And I know all the work that's happened on the town side with the new playground. I can't speak knowledge about any of these things with the new playground and some of the work that's been done at the baseball fields over there. And I think we've brought on more things that maintenance and operations are also responsible for. Town-wide.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We also picked up a townwide technology person, Scott, at the same time, didn't we? That's under the school umbrella, and Dave was under the town, right?
Correct. So when we consolidated technology, we did create a townwide technology position, which the way we ended up moving the funds around to balance it off is that the technology person technically falls under the school's budget. Dave falls under the town's budget. But we did actually add a staff member in technology from the school. Had two technology people who were supporting the school system, and the town, I think, had an independent contractor, I believe, who was someone that they were contracting some individual work out to. And we added a person, brought it all into one department as townwide technology. And as I said, I think that's been, I think we've really integrated the services for technology townwide really well. I have nothing but positive to say about the integration and the creation of the townwide technology department.
Thank you.
Not that I have negative things to say about maintenance and operation. Wasn't meant that way, Dave.
All right. Does anyone else have any thing to add to this particular conversation before we move on?
I don't see anybody.
Okay, so school reopening. I just put this on because I'm interested in the school committee's reflections and yours, and Scott, and yours, Brad, as well. I know it's got to be hard. And I know Mrs. Bogart is a mom with little kids, so I hear her thoughts on this too.
Scott, you want to start on that first with your reflections?
Yeah, it's a broad topic, and I'll try not to spend hours talking about it. I'll try to do it in 2 minutes.
Thank you.
I do think school districts across the state were put in a challenging position. And I understand why the state took its position that it did in terms of saying develop 3 models, a full remote model, a hybrid model, a full in-person model, be ready to transition between those 3 models. And the reality is, I don't know if any of us really knew what the right answers are or what the right answers were. And I've always said I don't claim to have the right answers. I've been trying to follow the guide of the community, along with my personal beliefs, what I believe is in the best interest of the students. And then also it's that balance of learning versus safety. I mean, ultimately, I will 100% tell you, I believe that in-person learning is the best thing that can be happening for kids in terms of education. And we've I think there's a lot that's happened in terms of things you can do remotely. And I think I was talking to a couple of teachers today who were really positive, saying, I think that, I've learned, their reflection was, I've learned a lot. And I think there's a lot of things I can actually bring into my full in-person class through some of the technology skills I've developed in this remote learning setting. But we would all say that, I think the majority of people would still say that full in-person learning is the best thing for learning. But we have to balance that against what's the safest thing. And we don't have the answers on what the safest thing is. And I know there's a lot of opinions out there. And the reality is when we surveyed when the school committee surveyed the community about what model they wanted to see us implement, if I remember correctly, it was around 40% hybrid, 40% full in-person, and 20% remote. That's a pretty balanced view of where people feel like we should be. And we tried to, and in the end, we made a decision to focus on this concept of 6 feet of social distancing. But there's a lot of guys out there saying that 6 feet of social distancing is the best way to go. And the way for us to most closely meet the 6 foot social distancing, because we can't guarantee it at all times, is in the hybrid model. And ultimately, I feel like that's why the school district has made a decision to implement the hybrid model. And long term, I think we all want to see us transition back to full in person. And now the challenge to the school committee is, what are the metrics to determine when you return in full person? When is the community of Carver going to be to it? That's the only way we can have people return full in person, is that we accept that there's going to be 18 or 20 kids in a classroom that are only going to be 3 feet apart or 4 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart. And does that lead to a larger increase of cases within the community of Carver? And what's the number? What's the acceptable number of cases or people in quarantine or those types of things that school districts may face in a return to full in-person learning? And these are the challenges the committee is going to have to grapple with over the next couple of months as we think about how we transition. Though I do think I'm 100% committed to having kids return in person. So we're going to begin in-person learning on Monday, September 28th. Looking forward to doing that. And then we're going to really look at what's the impact of that return to in-person. Is there an increase in cases or contacts within the school community? And how does that impact us? And if we do well for a period of time, then we have to consider how we're going to transition back to full in-person. But I don't know. I don't know if there is a right answer, and I don't know if we've made the right choices. But I know that we've been really thoughtful about it, and we've worked hard to make the best decisions we can as a committee. I think the last piece I'll say on this, and then I'll answer questions. And obviously, the committee can weigh on this as well. Is I just lost my last piece. It might come back to me. So I'll defer for a second, and I'll see if my last piece comes back to me.
Andy, you want to ask any of your committee members if they?
I would love to. Would any of our committee members like to have some add their reflections on the reopening so far? No one. All right. I can't see a hand thing, so if you want to speak, just wave your hand in front of the camera. No, okay. I think one of the things that, just from my own point of view, is that we asked for community feedback, and they really gave it to us. We got emails and messages and comments from people for weeks, and I really appreciated the community actually, putting their thoughts forward for what they thought the best thing for their child was. And of course, we had to decide on, weigh all of that and then decide on what we thought was best. And I think at the end, we took a pretty pragmatic stance with going with the hybrid. And then, of course, you saw that we had to alter that a little bit for a week and a half and have a delayed opening for hybrid. But we went the full remote for a week and a half. But I think that's just on my end of it. That was the most. It was just an important decision, and I actually wanted to hear more from the community and from my fellow committee members, because every one of my committee members has kids in school, at that age, So I was really interested in hearing their points of view, just as my role as the chairman. And that's why I think in the meetings you saw me speak last most of the times, because that was really important. I mean, we had the unique perspective of James, who's a teacher and is going through all this, so that was very valuable to us. And James always brings a valued opinion to the committee anyway, as all the rest of them do as well. But I don't know what's going to happen. As Scott said, I think we're just going week by week. And I too want to see everybody back in person fully. But as Scott said, then you're dealing with accepting the fact that to do that, we have to have the kids at 3-foot distancing and not 6. And that's something we're going to have to discuss. And I've actually been speaking to Scott about, and this is my fault that I haven't put this on the agendas more aggressively, even though we have been talking about it. I've asked Scott to come up with a framework for a district-wide phasing of metrics for us through the models to go forward or backward. That's right for Carver. And this is something that I'd like him to bring to our committee as a framework, and then have all of our members put input into. But we've been saying we were going to do this with the town to the parents, and it's like I said, it's my fault. I haven't pushed it more strongly. On that now, and I've actually tasked Scott with that. So it's just a thought that's passing through my mind right now. I wanted to mention to everybody.
I remembered my 2 thoughts, if that's okay, Sarah, if you don't mind me jumping. Sure. I said 1, but there's actually 2.
That's all right. I'm glad you remembered.
One of them was just, I just want to thank everybody who was actively involved in this process. We had a lot of parents who were involved, a lot of staff members, a lot of teachers, a lot of paraprofessionals, a lot of administrators that went into developing the 3 plans. And the reality is we're going to have to look at the implementation of them. So we started in a full remote model. And once this full remote model is done in a few days, I'm going to bring a group together to analyze what went well with that model, what didn't go well, and what possible changes we would need to recommend if we're forced into a full remote model again. And then my only other pieces that I wanted to mention is I do think, historically, Massachusetts has a historical concept of local autonomy. And I think the Department of Education has been trying to balance that between giving guidance, having state mandates, having state regulations, but also giving districts local autonomy to make decisions. But in some ways that's made it a little more challenging because in the end, every district's kind of doing their own thing, which I don't know in a public health crisis if that's always the best approach. Though the reality is most of the school districts in Plymouth County are going with a hybrid return. Those hybrid models actually, they'll look a little different from each community. Each community is kind of individualized them. And sometimes I think in this situation, maybe a more regionalized approach may have been beneficial. Not that I am looking to give or cede power or control from the town of Carver, but I think sometimes in this situation, a regional approach may have been helpful. So those are my 2 thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments?
Jen?
Yes.
Which Jen?
Mrs. Pratt? You went up first, I think, and then Mrs. Bogart.
Thank you. So given Andy's statement, I thought I would chime in with a short comment. From feedback that I've heard, both personally and what's been out on the classroom Facebook pages, it seems that remote learning is either going really well for people or really poorly. There's been some technology issues. I think they've been addressed fairly quickly. There are kids that just struggle learning from home, and I think that echoes Scott's sentiments that the best environment for kids to learn is in school. I think that many in the town are very anxious for the hybrid model to start next week, and many are anxious that we may get to a place sooner rather than later where we could do a full in-person return. And I think having this full remote start is sort of making people come to that conclusion quicker, because some people may be having more challenges. For my family personally, my kids do not like remote learning, but they are doing okay. We had to pick up some HDMI cords and some TVs, and we have TVs hooked up to the Chromebooks so that it captivates their attention a little more and they're not staring at a tiny screen. And that's been a big hit to make remote learning slightly more successful. But as a full-time working mom, it's been challenging making sure they're logged in when they need to be and also getting my job done. And so I personally can relate to a lot of the parents out there that are feeling like this is so hard and feeling very spread thin, because when we log off of this Zoom, I'm going to be logging back onto my work computer to finish some things that I didn't get to earlier today because my kids needed me. So, you know, I think that the staff are doing a phenomenal job. The teachers are taking everything in stride, and it is what it is. I hate that phrase, but it kind of fits. So those are my thoughts on the reopening. I think it's as good as it can be, and I appreciate everybody's positive attitudes towards it. And fingers crossed the buses are rolling a week from today and kids are entering the building doors. That's what we want to see.
Thank you. Mrs. Bogart.
All right, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it's not gone well for the last 4 days. You expect technological problems with such a big very power parent to log into the very first Zoom meeting. And then when they got logged in the next day, it wasn't quite as long. But then when they had to switch from the Zoom meeting to the Google Meet, then there was an issue there and people couldn't get logged in with sound there. And then on top of that, there's the video quality. Kind of like Jen said, the technological problems, the Chromebooks seem to be pretty blurry. I know ours, Madison couldn't read what was written on the board at all. So I had emailed her teacher to say it, and then actually switched from the Chromebook to our computer, and it was noticeably better, not perfect, but great. But I kind of expected, and this is probably going to come out wrong, but I kind of expected the teachers to be, I don't want to say to know more, that's the wrong word, but like, I know that Madison's teacher doesn't quite know how to log into Google Classroom and put the assignment on the board, or explain to the kids, like, she always says, like, I don't know what it says on your screen because I can just see mine. And I kind of thought the first 10 days of school were going to be more for that. So it's been very challenging. Like Jen, I have been going to school full time with Madison just to be there when she needs help. And then on the other side, there's behavioral problems. Like, it's so hard to keep these kids down. Like, her teacher spends so much time just kind of correcting behavior because the poor kids are just sitting there and bouncing around and moving. And I mean, that's to be expected, but it's so hard. So, so day 4, we're still waiting for a day to go well. Madison's a great kid. You know, she's there, but the school day is not successful. But I have a question after that. For next Monday, the 28th, I remember on one of the parent chats before school started, I think it was Mrs. Foley said that she's expecting 3 times as many cars at drop-off than normal. Do you guys have a police detail prepared? Because 58 is going to be a Zoom.
We do. So we've been in contact with the police. We have police details set up for the first week of school.
Good, because that's alarming. So, okay, yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. O'Brien.
So Jason, you had your hand up, man. Is this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. So I want to put a little personal perspective in this as well. You can go to any single town and you're going to run into those issues that you're running into right now. Socially, we're not ready for this. All right. The teachers may try to get prepared, but nobody's ready for it. And I can speak from it with a child in high school, a child in middle school, and I work in elementary. And I sat on my computer, and the first day I had 9 kids on my screen and nothing was working right. And everybody is running into technological issues. We should be glad that we're a district that has a device for everybody, because there are kids that are remote learning out there that don't even have devices right now. I got a nephew in Plymouth who's supposed to be going to Plymouth schools, and nobody's gotten him anything to get started in school, and school started a couple days ago. So we're not alone in this situation. Socially, we're not ready for this, but this is part of the future, and this is part of what's going to happen in education. And the only way that we're going to get more ready for it is to keep digging into it, and it's going to be part of it. And we can want to get back 100% as much as we want. That's not the reality right now. And even if we do, it doesn't mean we're going to get snapped right back out of it once something spreads or something happens again. So the idea is that everybody's trying to work through this together and prepare through this together. We voted to support the school in the situation that they needed, and I fully support the decisions that have been made. Everybody wants to be in school, but that's not a reality of a foreseeable future right now. So getting the kids back into school isn't necessarily going to make everything a lot easier too. One of the situations we run into is everybody trained remote, and we're using all this remote, but if every kid doesn't have a device, they may have one at home, but they don't have one in school. So now the kids are in school, and now you can't start using and continuing the things you're doing because the technology is not there. And I think Carver's in a really good place with every kid having their own device. I think this is going to take a while to start to work out and smooth out, because we are not socially ready for this yet. And regardless of how prepared teachers get, kids aren't, especially elementary. This is a little easier for high school and middle school because they're content-based and they can structure what they're doing off of computers that they're used to using anyway. But to hold the attention of 20-something elementary kids for a full day on a computer screen is, for lack of a better term, virtually impossible. And I think this is something that we're going to have to address, because it's not going to go away. It's not just going to disappear. And I think that everybody's trying their best and doing the best they can. I will a lot more fun days too, but they didn't work out that way. And regardless of what I had been prepared for, when the reality of sitting in front of that screen with all those kids came, there were technical issues all over the place. Kids, even still, we're using Google Meets, and kids drop in and out all day long because they can't keep a connection on it. It's everywhere. It's not just here. So I think everybody's kind of going through the same thing, and every town that you go to, as Scott said, they're all doing it differently. But for the most part, most people are either going remote or hybrid, and there's a curve that we're going to have to go through to get to where it's going to be. And I have no idea how long that's going to take.
If it's okay, the only thing I'd like to echo from James's comment is I do think it's particularly challenging for the youngest students. So we've heard a lot from, kindergarten just started today. We've heard a lot from first and second grade parents that it's been a challenge. It's a long day. And the reality is the kids are in school that long, but there's a big difference between being in school and how you interact in school versus how we interact in this setting. Even for adults, our interactions might be a little different this evening if we were all in person versus on a Zoom. And particularly for our 6 and 7 year olds, I think there's a real challenge in that. And I don't know if I have great solutions for that challenge. The technology stuff we can keep working through and trying to make it better and keep giving people training. And there's a lot of times, and if you think about yourself, if you get a technology training that happens virtually, and then you even have some time to operate and practice with it. Sometimes that first time you run it out, it still doesn't go perfectly. It's going to be a continual work in progress. But I think it is challenging, particularly for the younger you are, the more challenging it's been, at least these first 4 days.
Thank you. Mr. Greenwood, did you want to say something? Jason?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a few things, but I'm trying to decide which lane to go down, to be quite honest with you. I have a perspective of one who is planning for reopening at a school. So not just having kids that are participating in this, not actually, actually digging down and being one of the people who are responsible for the decisions that are made at the school level if something does go wrong. And this committee's work is far from done. We have 90 some odd kids in our building. We've already sent people home. We've had teachers who are positive. We have kids who are sent home sick. This is only in my district where I work. Yeah, this is not in Carver. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, like this And that's only with 90 kids in the building. And, not saying that that's going to happen in Carver, but it's a possibility. And I think we have a lot of work ahead of us in case, we're hoping for the best. We need to plan for what may happen. Now, like Andy said, we all have kids here. I have kids in the system. I honestly don't think it's appropriate to share how my kids are doing because I don't want my decisions in this committee based on how my kids are doing. I want the decisions of this committee unbiased. I want the decisions of this committee to be in what's the best interest for all of Carver Public Schools. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from a lot of people and some negative feedback. And I'm trying to find the best way, and I mean no offense with this, Sarah, for you putting this on the agenda, but if I was just a parent listening to this, the perception of even having this conversation is school committee made the wrong choice based on the way this conversation has went, in my opinion. And that goes against our protocols, that kind of goes against everything. So as James said, we made a vote. Listen, this was the first contested vote in a year and a half that I actually was on the winning side of. I know all about losing contested votes. It's not a secret. I lose almost every single one I'm in. But at the same time,
good fight, Jason.
But I'm just saying, but when that happens, you know what I mean? I'm accepting the decision of the committee. And when we have conversations like this, I feel like that's circumvented. So
I assure you that was not the intent, Jason.
I know it's not, but kind of the way the conversation is going and previous conversations and just, what community members say and what goes on the Facebook and goes on the interwebs. It's all out there. And what I wanted to say. So with that, I'm going back to mute.
Sarah, can I say one thing?
Yes, Andy, please.
Actually, I want to ask Scott if this might be pertinent to this as well. This is something that the elementary administration and the middle high school administration put out to help parents. And Scott, could you touch on the two resource pages for one for the elementary and one for the middle high school? And not that you have to say, just an overview.
So it's linked on the school's website, but each school building, the elementary school, middle high school, created what they call a COVID site, a COVID Google site, which really gives you all the specific information you'd want for that individual building in terms of protocols, procedures, schedules. It actually has some useful resources, some videos for parents on how to access Google Classroom and what some of the protocols are going to look like when students return to school on Monday. So it actually talks about drop off and pick up, where you actually ask each principal to make a presentation about drop off and pick up Thursday night as part of the school committee meeting, because we know we turn on Monday and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, as Jen pointed out. So we want to talk about that a little bit, but really anything related specifically to COVID-19, each building's created a dedicated website to that with all the information that a parent or a community member might need. And those are both linked off the school's main page at carver.org, and you can get to those Google sites, and they were sent out to parents as well.
Yeah, they really are a really good resource for parents. And if you actually go on the carver.org website, just for anybody watching, and go to the drop-down menu on the left, and go to the 2020-2021 school year information, click on that, and halfway down, you'll see two boxes, maybe a quarter of the way down, and one just says CES resource page, MHS resource page. And really, they're both great aggregates of what's offered during this time for the schools, and it was a lot of work from the administration, or for anybody watching. That's all I wanted to get out there. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
I think Bob's waited patiently. Bob, not to call.
Oh, Bob, I'm sorry.
Bob put his hand up the whole time.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
Stephanie just raised her hand too.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say is my kids are all older. I have no skin in the game per se. What you guys have been through with this is extraordinary. Decisions you guys have to make for the children's of our community. I want to thank you guys very much for doing it. all right? Thankless job, okay? You take it all. You take the positives, the negatives, everything, okay? But in the end, you're trying to do your best. And I want to say thank you very much. I know there's challenges for parents. I hear it at my job, and I hear it from the community at large. It's challenging, especially for single parents. Some had to actually leave their jobs to care for their kids because they didn't go to school. And now they're trying to be not only mom and housekeeper and cook and cleaner and everything else goes on in the house. Now they're going to be a teacher because they got to help their kids, and they're going through a learning curve for it. And I understand that. It's very challenging. If I was in that position, I'd have a hard time. My math is not the best, all right, and trying to learn this new system is difficult. But I want to commend you guys. I want to commend the teachers doing their job to help teach our kids. And it's going to be a curve. I know with me, with the computer systems at my work and other work that I've had when I've had to change, it's tough. It's tough learning a new system. But hopefully this will pass. And when it does, it's a good learning experience for all of us. And just keep up the good work, guys. I do appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Stephanie, did you want to say something? You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say thanks, Bob. There have been so many people that have been involved in getting this school district to this point since when, Scott, May or June, when we started with the reopening committee. There's been countless hours, countless discussions. The 3 models that we had to come up with, and then decide what was the best to start for our district. And I can understand there not being more of a regional plan because each district is truly unique and has their own building issues and their own demographic issues and their own limited resources. I could certainly share my thoughts about my 5th graders' experience thus far, but I echo and agree with Jason that this is truly what's in the best interest of the entire Carver community based on the current circumstances. We all want the kids back in school. We all want art shows and science fairs and drama productions and choral concerts and sporting events. We all want that. I think not only just for ourselves, but also for our children, because we all are so craving that sense of normalcy, that elementary school experience, that high school experience that we were all able to have, that these kids are missing out on. I know it's a challenge, but I know that if we all continue to work together and to communicate well, that we'll get through it together. And I just want to reiterate to people that may be watching that if you are having issues, to please reach out to either your building principal or Mr. Neve. I know that Scott's done an amazing job with responding to parents' concerns, and I have the utmost faith that he and his staff will continue to do so. But they will not know necessarily if something's wrong or an issue that you might be having unless they are told about it. So I just wanted to encourage people to please reach out, because your feedback is important to every one of us. And I'm sure that if there is an issue that's happening, if there's something that can be done, I'm sure it will be addressed. But again, just please share those difficulties with Mr. Neef and with building principals. And I think that's that. So thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add before we move on that I echo Bob's and Stephanie's comment that I think the school committee and the teachers and the staff have done an amazing job, and we really appreciate it. The intent here was not for people to make the situation look bad or better than it is, but rather just to tell us in general terms how things were going. And I think it's amazing that you've gotten this far. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Sarah.
So the next item is a review of future capital outlay expenditures and how any potential budget shortfall might affect them. Which one of the money guys wants to go first?
I put this on the agenda just for sort of curiosity's sake to start the discussion on them, really. One of the good things about meeting in person is we would usually get the handouts of the capital budget, for future items. I don't know, maybe between Rick and Brad, you can fill us in maybe on some of these things.
Yeah, so I can just touch base quickly on the capital items that we are thinking are going to be removed for FY21. From the school side, it is just the two 71 passenger buses that'll free up, I think, right around 165 or 170,000 in capital improvement money. Again, my thing is I always have the long-term approach. This is good for 1 year. We're getting free money for 1 year. It frees up money. But I think we're coming at a crossroads of saying how sustainable is our operating budgets and with capital and everything else going on. So I'm not here to advertise that we need to change anything. I just want everyone to get in the mindset of, I think when we start to look at FY22 numbers, that discussion may need to be brought up of how much money we are putting into capital improvement, and if that's sustainable based on where revenue sources are coming in from both state and local, and how that's the impact on our operational budgets. And I can speak on that's going to be on both sides. It's not just going to be the school that's going to be hurting. The town side's going to be hurting as well.
I agree with you, Brad, completely at what you would expect because we've discussed this together. In terms of our short-term capital, though, as Brad mentioned, primarily the two school buses have been pushed off. A good piece of that, though, is utilizing the solar revenue. Actually, we're not getting some of that. A significant portion of that is intended to fund capital through the capital stabilization account. So to the extent that we're not getting those funds because of some of the additional growth through pilots that for projects that were intended to come online in this current fiscal year, that's a big chunk of money which would feed the fund. So the buses are the big items that we'd be looking to delay. And those would be pushed back a year, again, under the current model. And I'm not talking about, aside from what Brad is saying, when we start our revenue projections for FY22, we may have a whole different perspective on this. But under the current model, the issue we're having right now with revenue primarily is from our solar, lack of solar new growth. That will correct itself next year. So purely from a capital standpoint, from capital stabilization fund right now, to the extent that that's only a 1 year problem, means that for instance, the buses, they'll be pushed off a year. And some of the other items that you were looking at in FY22, which to a great extent is a model, the estimates in there are not tight. We'll say, I don't want to, they're educated guesses as to what some of these things may cost. So I think it's a matter of, we'll be pushing things back, down the 10-year plan, maybe 1 year at a time, sharpening the pencil on some of these items that maybe we don't have to push them back. But purely from a capital standpoint right now, based upon the current modeling prior to the beginning of the FY22 budget process, it's not bad on paper. Again, on paper, moving these capital items back 1 year. Because as Brad said and Scott said, these have to be replaced next year. These are on schedule for this year, and you can only put things off so much. So I don't know if that's very helpful, but because it may sound more optimistic than it seems, than it really is once we get into the 22 budget planning process. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah. No, that's okay, good. Andy, does that help you with your question about?
Yeah, that does. Brad, could you just give a little description to everybody else here about what regulates the bus operation? I mean, it's really the DOT. They have to come down and inspect these buses, and if they don't pass inspection, we can't run them.
Correct.
So,
yeah,
I mean,
thrown out. Thankfully, Carver's done a really good job in keeping with the replacement cycle. So we do have some spares. We also have a few that that are directly allocated for sports that we can definitely throw on a route on a day-to-day basis. And especially now with the COVID regulations of only one child per seat. So we went from being able to transport up to 71. We never had that high number because 71's based on elementary students. But from going to have that capacity all the way down to 23 significantly hurts. And the way COVID regulations are for buses is they're trying to maintain the same cohort of kids on the bus at the same time. So having the spares kind of helps us if there's a case that we need to have and put a new bus on a road. That's have one on hand is always a positive. The problem you come up with though when you push this down the line is all of a sudden you need 4 buses that are on the borderline of being thrown out, that all of a sudden you don't have the money to cover 4 buses. So keeping in with I always say you try to get 4 new buses every 3 years for Carver size, and that's going to keep our replenishment plan where buses average lifespans about 10 to 11 years on the road.
I was gonna say, Brad, what's our oldest buses on the road right now?
I think it's like 2008 right now. I think
it's a
we have
2008.
one of those left, I think.
Yes, I think we have a 2008 still on the road.
Yeah.
So that, so
They're
that
at
would be the one that would come off the road.
Exactly.
By delaying, that we can do it this year, but next year we'll just need to move forward with having the bus.
No, we've done a good job too of when I first came on here, we used to bid it out where when we sent the bids out, people would actually we'd purchase a bus, we'd also sell one. We were only getting like $1,500 from a contractor who bid on it. So now we've actually been going out selling those to the last couple actually went to Wareham. Wareham had an issue a couple years ago with 2 weeks before school. I think a small amount of their buses got thrown out. They were able to purchase one from us directly, get it registered on the road, and we were able to use that money to offset the cost of the purchase of the new one. So we've done a good job there too. But again, we want to keep every 4 years, every 3 years, we want to have 4 new buses on the road. Yes, you can deter that from a year to year. You can push that back, but you can't get caught, continue to push these off from every year.
Right. Anybody have any questions for Brad on that? Comments or anything? No. Yeah, it's Rick that we heard the bus side and the school side of that. Those are the 2 biggies. Is there anything on the town side you think that might have to be pushed off that is in the forecast? If we run in?
Yeah, just for the current fiscal year, we're really talking about the funding that we had putting in place for our energy reduction project, about $100,000. But we do think, working with the finance director, there may be another outlet for some of those funds, so that we can take it off the capital plan this year. So that's to be determined. Obviously, it's important to maintain this because this is also part of a grant program. But we do have some revolving fund money that we may be able to use from our net metering contracts, so that it doesn't have to be on this plan, and we shouldn't have to be seeking a subsequent appropriation later in the year. But that would be the largest thing, non-school item right now.
And that's part of the Green Communities Act, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Well, hopefully we don't need it, and hopefully things turn around for us soon.
Yeah. Okay. There's no further discussion on this item. Let's move on to a discussion of a potential future upgrade to the audiovisual equipment in the CMHS auditorium.
Now go to the polar opposites now on questions. We talked about reducing, now we're talking about adding.
I know.
Well, this is something I wanted to get out there just to have it on the radar. I'm sure, as all of you are longtime residents, and this is nothing about Area 58 or any of the staff down there. They do the best job they can do, and they do a great job most of the time. But it's about the equipment. And I had a conversation with Rich at one point, because we've had issues in the auditorium with picture quality, with audio quality, at our meetings, at town meetings, multiple years, and complaints from the community. So I asked Rich about what are the things he would like to see put in as upgrades if we could do them. And he mentioned about having the RoboCams like in the selectman's office that are mounted to the walls. That way he doesn't have to have physical operators there, with lines going up and over the floor. And I know he's talked about getting some newer microphones. And I don't even know how much these things cost, but I really just put this on the agenda to get it on the radar of the town and the school about a potential upgrade in the future. So I don't know if if anybody has any comments on that, or maybe if Rich is listening, if Rich, you want to say something, you can feel free. But no one? All right.
I think he's disappeared.
Okay, that's fine. Well, anyway, that's so if there's no discussion on that, that's just something that I'd like to get on the radar, as I said, and because, you know, like I said, I've watched town meetings before, recordings of town meetings, and you couldn't hear anything, and one year I couldn't see anything. watching a replay, you know, so.
Yeah, and I know I've spoken to Rich about this too, and he does have some things he'd like to upgrade to. So we'll just keep that in the forefront of our minds.
Right, and one of the things he asked about too is on the school side, is maybe having a little dedicated space, if those things ever became a reality, a little dedicated space in the school as a little control room. So they could actually have a person there and just go live like that.
Right. Mr. Hoffman?
I just had a question too. And, if this COVID continues and these are meetings, you know, being, we have to downsize the amount of people, maybe more meetings could be held in the auditorium, the high school auditorium. And if some of these upgrades could be covered by the CARES Act. I don't know if we've discussed that at all. But I know we've talked before, like if we like a joint meeting like tonight, if under circumstance were better, we could have all met there and the public could have been there. Really, the only place we could have done it was the high school auditorium. So I'm just concerned that if going forward, if the situation stays the same for a while, that maybe more meetings can be put there. But like you said, Andy, you know, there's been a lot of technical problems that the people at home can't either hear or can't see it. So
And
again,
also-
you know, in future discussions, maybe we can.
Yeah, also, Jim, I want to point out that there was a done and was unable to be at the meeting, and we wanted to be able to include the membership from both committees. And I know that the school also has a schedule for the use of that auditorium. I'm not sure which days it's available, but tonight we did it this way, and anyone can come on. I mean, that goes to the next item, maybe upgrading Area 58's Zoom capacity, because I know you can get the kind of license, a townwide license, for way more than, I think I have a license for maybe 100 people, but I know you can get one for way more than that. So I think that's something we should really seriously consider.
Yeah, right now, Area 58 can only host 100 Zoom participants right now. Now, this is a light meeting. We're only at 26 right now, but we've had meetings with the reopening close to 300 participants through Zoom.
Right.
And
I think Zoom has platforms. It probably just costs a little more money.
Yeah.
To have between 500 and 1,000 people. So I know it's doable.
Yeah, our current license on the school side, which is free for education until December 31st, is 500. So my personal, if I set up a Zoom meeting, I can do 500.
That's excellent. Okay. Yeah.
James.
But the concern on the Area 58 side is, so we've had these large meetings with 200 to 300 people attending, and if I set up the Zoom, Area 58 can't broadcast it live. They can tape it, but it can't be a live presentation. If they set up the Zoom, it can be live. So that's really the distinction.
Yeah. Mr. O'Brien.
Thanks. So not to diminish the request for audio and that conversation, because it certainly is important, but that whole auditorium needs to be gutted. We need everything in there changed. It is not in good shape. And to Jim's point, Jim, we held not our last meeting, but our last two meetings there, with the total attendance of the two meetings being 5 people and over 200. One of them nobody came to, and several hundred people online. So it was, again, not to diminish it, but it really wasn't worth our time to go in there because nobody was coming to the actual meeting. They were all online viewing it anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I don't know. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm just saying, I know some of the other committee meetings that there are, especially if there's a hearing, that some people have to wait out in the hallway because the selectman's office, the selectman's room would have too many people. So those are more the meetings I was talking about. But you're right, James, that some of those meetings we anticipate a lot more than, and there weren't. But again, I know some of the other committee meetings have had people wait in the hallway. So just throwing it out there, that's all.
Yeah, and
So
we've
Rick,
been having public hearings, if they're going to be a public hearing, whether it's a poll hearing or that no one usually comes to, those are going to be Zoom meetings because I don't want to encounter that problem, Jim, like you said, with people waiting out in the hall, they can't hear what's going on, and so on. I'm sorry, who was next, Andy?
I apologize. I was just throwing in asking Rick if the couple $1 million on capital outlay for the auditorium is out of the question, I guess.
Oh, you're a card, James.
I think it's on the 10-year plan.
No, I think I had you on mute. Sorry, James.
No, but can I just add on to this real quick, just from a long-term perspective? I don't want to, I laugh at the capital list sometimes because we've always been pushing things back. Prime example is redoing the two locker rooms. And we're going to get to the point where we're going to be 5 years down the road and we're going to be looking at maybe a new building 10 years away. So it's going to come to the toss-up of, do you want to invest $3-4 million in a facility that you're going to be either totally renovating for MSBA or getting a new building? And to me, that's not money well spent, but that's going to be up for the committee to discuss. The longer we push these things off, I know we don't have the money to cover this right now. I completely understand that. But the longer we push them off, the closer it's going to be to say, why are we going to spend the money to do this in the first place when we're 10 years out of a new building or an updated building?
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
My one question on this, maybe Rick can answer this, is Rick, who does Area 58 fall under? Is it because there's a cable committee?
There's a cable advisory committee.
And are they funded completely by Comcast, or do we? I can't remember from my days on the finance committee looking at the sheets if there was a budget for them.
No, there isn't, and just to, a cable advisory committee doesn't oversee the operation of the cable access corporation. There's a separate board that does that, and I don't recall in this town how that board is appointed. The cable advisory committee is basically in place to negotiate successor agreements for cable licensing with the Comcast, Verizon, whoever your provider happens to be. So I'd have to say, Andy, I'd have to look and see exactly how the cable access corporation, how the membership and the board members are constituted and by whom here. I know in some places it's a appointment by the Board of Selectmen, select board, and I know that some places it's school committees and boards, select boards have several appointments to a cable access corporation board. So I'd have to look it up to see how it's done right here in Carver at the moment.
Okay, thank you. If we wanted to, say we thought it was a good idea, they thought it was a good idea to increase their subscription to Zoom to accommodate more people, and say it costs about $1,000 a year, or probably less than that. Where would the money come from that? Would it be a town-wide thing? Would it be a joint expenditure because it's benefiting the town and the school? Where would you think something like that? How could we fund something like that?
Good question.
Area 58 could decide to fund it out of their budget?
Yeah, I mean, usually those unless it's a specific, having to do specifically with an upgrade to the building itself, because most, as I say, to the extent that some of these cable studios are located sometimes in school buildings, you have to obviously separate the capital needs, the capital, I'm not sure what the word is, jurisdiction of the school versus your cable access corporation. But in this town, I don't, other than infrastructure in town school buildings, I think all capital costs are really upon Area 58.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Bell?
Area 58 is a separate organization from the towns, and they also are incorporated with Plimpton.
And
but
Halifax.
in Halifax. And when you're looking at a funding mechanism, we actually have a funding mechanism. They all have to do is fill out a grant application to the Finance Committee that was created. And thus, I think it's like $25,000 that the Finance Committee's been authorized by town meeting to fill a grant opportunity for that. So if you're looking for funding where there's money already put in place for this, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm actually not too sure, Bob. I think historically, cities and towns, you used to have petitions from a lot of these social service agencies that would be seeking donations and funding. So I think the grant program that of which you speak, I don't think has historically been used for that purpose. I don't think it couldn't be, but just as I believe that would be, you'll find that to be the case in most small, medium towns in the region, if not throughout the state. They're usually human services grants.
So Rick, excuse me, you weren't here and you don't know this, but it went from the people at town meeting voting in for non-profit organizations. It was delegated to the Finance Committee to take on a grant program instead of accepting petition articles. So this was an alternative means to get around town meeting. So town meeting didn't have that choice. It goes to the Finance Committee. So, and I know I've seen a couple of meetings they've had where they have petitions for people that want to get grants. So I just think if we're only talking $1,000, $2,000, the Finance Committee is the ones to go to. And if Rich turns around and fills out that application, goes through the process, I don't see why they wouldn't do it, because it would benefit our town.
And can I just add to, just pointed out to me that a lot of times these upgrades come in the negotiations for successor agreements from Comcast or Verizon. That would be the funding source for a lot of the capital upgrades, and it'd be done during the negotiation process for a successor agreement. Of course, the problem tends to be that those are renewed every 10 years, so you pretty much have to get while the getting's good. And I don't know exactly what the status is right now of the renewal process here. If it's completed, if there's contracts pending, if it's a year or two away, but I think that's tends to be a time, even though it's few and far between, when there is an opportunity for some capital to get some capital investment from the cable provider itself, not the local through the Cable Access Corporation.
Right.
All I know is Scott.
So thank you, Elaine, for putting that bug in my ear.
Yes, thank you, Elaine. Andy, you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, just one more thing. All I know is Scott and Rich spent a great amount of time trying to figure out a way using our account to link in with Rich so he could host the meetings while using our account, and there was just no way they could figure out how to do it.
Right.
So that's how we got to this point.
Well, we'll have to keep trying to figure this out in the future.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for that conversation, everybody.
So I think we've covered the audiovisual equipment as well as the expansion of Area 58 Zoom subscription.
Yep.
So
down to number 8.
Excuse me?
We're just down to number 8, right?
Yes, our last item is discussion of FY22 townwide budget forecast timeline. I guess we'll turn that over to you, Rick, right now, and then Mr. Neef.
Sure. And again, I would obviously, if Scott wishes to interrupt, feel free. Historically, I know that here the budget process is such that your department budgets would be more or less submitted and reviewed by the department heads, by the town administrator, and ultimately the school administration with their district budget by the end of December. That could be a little bit aggressive this year in light of the fact that, we're probably not going to be able to start this budget process till the beginning of November rather than September. So I do believe we're going to be a little bit behind. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that by mid-December, we should be able to be in a position where we've got a preliminary recommended budget to all the parties. A lot of what I see in the flow chart here for the budget process in step 1 and step 2, those can be done simultaneously. Some policy directive, revenue forecasting, because that's done throughout the budget process anyway, not just at step 1. So even though we're behind, we'll probably be behind by about 2 months in a budget process. I think that realistically by mid-December, we can be pretty much on track with recommended budgets to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee. And that again puts us pretty close on track to a process that completed by mid-March, so we can get ready for an April town meeting. Assuming we're ready for an April town meeting, it's very possible. This may be one of those years where we're looking at a town meeting that's a little bit later because we need a little bit more time. But I think we can probably get back close to on track right after, if we start November 1, but more or less combine what are traditionally step 1 and step 2 in this budget process simultaneously. But I don't know, and obviously I have to defer to Scott and Brad and the members of the school committee. I know that you have a whole other set of challenges trying to put together a proposed district budget, and you're in the same, we're all in the same boat here trying to figure out what the current year budget is from which we're going to be building off. So, Scott, Brad, any comments on that?
No, I think giving us mid-December as a target estimate right now kind of gives us what we need for info in terms of getting something turned around. In the meantime, obviously, we just for practice, I can create a general level service budget at any given time. I could do that now, but obviously there's going to be things that change, and what is COLA going to look like for next fiscal year has a lot to do with overall our budget as well. But I think that this mid-December target actually is very helpful for the school department, and also with negotiations and everything else that's going to be.
A lot of I guess the challenge becomes, or the finesse comes in terms of projecting our large fixed costs, because we don't, by mid-December, we're probably going to have to be still making some very conservative estimates that probably are going to make a budget projection look hopefully worse than it actually will be, but that can be difficult to have mid-December, but I think that's probably typical. I would just caution that first draft of a budget you see is not going to be pretty.
Thank you. Scott, Brad?
I have nothing additional. That's
okay.
Where we are.
No.
Andy?
That's all for me. I mean, I'd be interested to see how the state comes down with their projections and how long that's going to take. But
yeah,
it should be interesting this spring. But no, I think that was it for us. So
okay.
I'll make a motion. We adjourn.
Well, I'll entertain that motion first.
Second.
And I'll take a motion to adjourn as well.
How about select board makes the motion to adjourn,
okay.
And then the school committee. So
Sounds good.
Mr. Belbin made the motion.
Second.
Mark Townsend made second. Select board, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. School committee.
Carver School Committee, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
So moved.
to adjourn School committee.
Okay.
Second. I lost all of them. Just do it.
We have a motion and a second. James and Stephanie, Jason and Stephanie.
It doesn't matter.
No, we've been doing Zoom.
You matter, Jason. You
We've
matter.
been doing roll call votes on Zoom, Sarah.
Yeah, we should do it. We should do a roll call vote. Yes.
Yes, we should. I actually think you're required to.
Yes, you're required to Zoom.
Yeah. My
you wanna-
mistake. Okay, Mr. Belbin,
Robert Belvin says aye.
Mrs. Bogard,
And Bogart, aye.
Jim Hoffman,
Jim Hoffman, aye.
Mark Townsend,
Mark Townsend says aye.
Sarah Hewen says aye. Okay, the select
Alrighty.
board vote is unanimous. We are officially adjourned. School committee chair,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jen Pratt,
Jen Pratt, aye.
James O'Brien,
James O'Brien, aye.
Jason Greenwood,
Jason Greenwood, aye.
Stephanie Clarity,
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
and Andy Cottarelli says aye as well. It's unanimous. We are adjourned at 8:36 p.m. I want to thank everybody tonight for this
Thank you,
meeting.
everybody.
Night, everybody.
Yeah.
Night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good night.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Good night.